Welcome to the story of my blind, scuffed, Semi-Ironman run of Fire Emblem Thracia 776. If you haven't seen my previous video, I highly recommend you watch that one first. Where we left off, Leif failed to liberate the city of Thracia, and now we find him running for his life in Chapter 14X, Disaster in the Dark. While the Empire may be seething at their inability to capture Thracia, they are quite capable of pursuing Leif to the ends of the earth. Leif's only escape route is through a narrow valley while the Empire has every conceivable advantage imaginable. So what does this look like gameplay-wise? Well, quite frankly, it looks like utter BS. The next level is a dark level, where the enemy has ambush spawn Pegasus Knights and Dark Mages. To make matters even more complicated, Leif's army isn't the only one fleeing down this path, as villagers are also trying to escape the Empire's wrath. Yes, you heard that right. This is an escort quest dark level with ambush spawns. This level is everything you should never do in level design, and I hate it for that, but I also can't fault it, because the narrative sets this up so perfectly. This is going to suck, and I kind of applaud the game for being so bold in its dedication to narrative weight. The good news is that Lady Linnuin has decided to accompany us, and she's another staff user with awful stats but good utility. She starts with some great spells, including a torch staff and a restore staff. These are fantastic tools I'd love to have, so long as she isn't captured by a Pegasus Knight. Okay, that was probably inevitable. Rip Linnuin stuff. This level is complete chaos as I try my best to protect civilians while moving forward, but it isn't all bad. The enemy mages have re-warp staffs, which makes them excellent capture targets. Rewarp is a 5-use spell that teleports my mage anywhere on the map of my choice, and this promises to be a fun spell to use in the future, if I get out of here alive. The enemy Pegasus Knights, while really annoying, also have extremely poor stats, so most of my army can deal with them. The big problem is the boss. He has Fenrir. This is a 10-range spell on a dark map. I send Alfred a bit too far forward before I know he exists, and yeah. He stood absolutely no chance. Rip Alfred. You were a good unit. The smart thing to do when confronted with this obstacle would be to bring up a tank to waste his limited Fenrirs before advancing further. The civilians I'm escorting have other plans. Mainly, their plans consist of charging into the unknown no matter the risk. My only means of protecting these civilians from a very preventable death is to rescue them, and that would leave my units way too vulnerable to be useful. After experimenting with trying to protect the civilians, I realized that's just not going to be viable. The mage misses a Fenrir on Orson, who reaches level 20 and uses a Master Seal, becoming a true hero. The mage then uses Fenrir to absolutely wreck 2 civilians, leaving him with 1 more cast left. Trying to save the last civilian, I move my army up north, and the mage uses Fenrir on Olwen. Somehow, she survives with 3 HP, but she's also poisoned, and as soon as my turn begins, she dies alongside her brother. Alfred and Olwen teamed up with me to help take down the Empire, only to find themselves lost in a narrow valley fleeing the thing they swore to destroy. Without them, Leif would have died long ago, and because of their contributions, there's still hope. Before I can properly mourn them, I still need to escape. An enemy hero runs off with a 3rd civilian, and the Pegasus Knights make it difficult to move forward, but an end to this cursed valley is in sight. Orson avenges my fallen by putting an axe through their killer's skull, and the remaining civilians start escaping. After a while, I finally set it up so everyone can escape, and I take my opportunity. I've somehow gotten out of the cursed valley, but at a great cost. Chapter 15, 2 Paths. The next level is an interesting one with more experimental design. Bandits are attacking a small church town near the center of the map, and Leif needs to decide whether he cares. To beat the map, all Leif needs to do is end his turn on any one of 3 squares. As he moves to assault Castle Leonster, he can either take the path through a big Imperial fort, try to sneak through a mysterious forest that costs the lives of all who enter, or end his turn on church and talk to the elder there. Each victory condition is pretty easy to accomplish, so naturally, I choose the most complicated option. Instead of going for one victory condition, I try to split my forces in every direction and try to fight the seemingly endless horde of barbarians attacking the church. This is, predictably, a bit of a disaster, as my army isn't really able to slow down this army when it starts so far away. However, I do get some help. The hero Ralph and Lady Amalda start pushing the bandits back as Dean flies over the cliffs to join them. By visiting a west side village, I get another scroll, which is fantastic, but bandits pillage the church in return. After a while, Ida flies Leaf over the mountain to give some more relief, while my army takes the slow way around. Leaf helps recruit Ralph to our side, but disappointingly, I don't seem to have a dialogue option with Amalda. Around when Orson arrives, the bandit leader starts to move, and things get pretty scary once again. The bandit leader does a ton of damage while dodging seemingly everything, and scarier reinforcements start to pop out of the bandit forts. Dean falls to 4 health and has to fight his way out of danger, while an enemy sellsword nearly kills Helvin with a killing edge. After several more rounds, Brighton finally kills the bandit leader, and I start to breathe a little easier. The bandits are now less of a threat, instead becoming tools to be captured. From them, I get a bunch of useful gear before the reinforcements end. After killing all the enemies on the map, I make a mistake. Instead of fighting the Imperial army head-on, I head to the Forest of Awfulness, and am wholly unprepared for the pain that waits for me there. Chapter 16. The Worst Level. Here it is. The worst level in the game. You might have assumed that it couldn't get any worse than a nighttime escort quest with ambush spawns, but it absolutely does. I've actually heard there is an even worse level later on, but I never ran into it, so I can't comment on what I didn't see. What I can say though, is that this freaking forest was a bad idea, and I hate my advisor for telling me to come here. This forest is the home of Eloption Mage Camp, and the first thing I notice is that the enemy commander is complete BS. He has a Berserk staff with range all. Berserk is a status condition that forces the afflicted unit to attack the nearest person, regardless of whether that person is a friend or foe. In other games, Berserk is balanced by having a time limit, but I'm wising up to this game's balancing now, and realize here, it's probably permanent. So that's awful. To make things worse, I don't have a restore staff anymore, since I lost my only one in the nighttime escape. The next thing I notice is the terrain of the map, which is near 100% forest tiles. My movement on this map is going to be near 0, my accuracy is going to be awful, and to make matters even worse, both of my flyers are too tired from the previous map to actually contribute here. I could have used a stamina drink to refresh my stamina, and in retrospect I probably should have, but these items are very limited and I don't want to use them unless it's absolutely necessary. To make things even worse, I need to do this without Orson and Safia, who are also too tired to join us. As I start the chapter, the enemies outright mock my decision to come here in the opening cutscene, calling my strategy a colossal blunder. Then, when I visit a nearby house, I learn the final reason behind what makes this level so terrifying. The enemy mages have created unmarked warp tiles on this map, where if I step on them, I will be warped somewhere completely different on the map. So that's another thing I need to watch out for. Just fantastic. My goal is to walk forward slowly, keeping my army together, and hoping I don't get berserked. Thankfully, the game does offer me one tiny lifeline here that keeps me from getting completely stuck. Lady Sarah, an enemy cleric, decides to take a walk while carrying restore and silence staffs. I don't know who Lady Sarah is, and I have no idea if she's recruitable, but I do know that I need to kidnap her ASAP if I'm going to get through this forest. Next turn, she warps over closer to my army, and I'm given the chance to do exactly that. Just in time too, because in that moment the boss strikes, using Berserk on Brighton. I've kidnapped a girl and stolen her staffs, but that's only half the puzzle, since I need to get these staffs to Linnowind and make sure Brighton doesn't kill anyone in the process. Brighton attacks Leaf, bringing my lord down to 4 health, thankfully not killing him. Through a bunch of trading, I finally get the staffs to Linnowind, then release Lady Sarah from her captivity. She claims we were boring, then goes on her merry way. Now I have to lure Brighton to Linnowen, which is not easy considering Linnowen has 16 health and will die to a light breeze. On my next turn, Brighton brings Alba down to 10 health, and unfortunately ends his turn a little too far away for Linnowen to rescue him. The next turn, Brighton attacks Finn, and I think I might have lured him close enough until he just cantos away. Seeing an opportunity, I just decide to retreat my army from Brighton, hoping he fights the nearby mages instead of my units. This doesn't work, but he does attack Leaf, completely missing my lord, and finally ending his turn within range of Linnowen. Seizing my opportunity, I restore Brighton and... Are you kidding me? You had one job, Linnowen. One job. And you missed your freaking restore spell? At this point, the enemy mages are starting to build up, and I'm getting a little worried. They have low hit rates but do a lot of damage, and I do not have antitoxins to cure poison if they inflict that status. At least Brighton starts attacking them instead of me, and I get lucky dodging a lot of their shots. At this point, the boss mage uses a second berserk, this time on Ralph. Luckily for me, Ralph is standing right next to Linnowen, and I successfully restore him before it becomes a problem. Next turn, the boss does the same thing, using his final berserk on Ralph. Linnowen cures him again, and the boss is thankfully out of berserks. At the end of my turn, Brighton kills off the last mage in the area, then gets hit by the mage's poison attack. Shockingly, this cures him of his berserk, and just like that, I've survived this phase of the level. No more berserks, and everyone is still alive. I can't say I expected that when I started the level. What an excellent surprise. Unfortunately, just because everyone is alive doesn't mean I'm in fantastic shape. Brighton, Finn, and Glade are all poisoned. I don't have any antitoxins with me, and Linnowen is... well, let's just say she's learning how to be a good healer. The forest is a really annoying biome to fight in, as the hit rate nerf makes everything way more unpredictable than normal. On top of everything, enemy mages are still attacking, and an enemy dancer is being super annoying, giving everything extra turns to punish my army of sitting ducks. There are also thicket tiles everywhere, which look just like forest tiles except that they prevent units from moving through them, so moving around is really cumbersome. Eventually, the enemy dancer gives a Lopsian mage 2 additional turns to attack an enemy phase, and he hits 2 36% attacks on Halvin, killing him. Halvin may not have been my best unit, but he was a reliable one, and losing him really sucks. A minute later, it looks like history is about to repeat itself when a mage hits Leaf with an attack, then gets danced to go again. However, Leaf dodges the follow-up and barely survives. On my next turn, I get my vengeance as Finn charges down the dancer and Glade finishes off the mage. Unfortunately, healing isn't so simple, as Linnowen misses her attempt to heal an 8 health Brighton. Brighton falls to 5 health and Leaf falls to 3 health, and if it isn't obvious enough, I don't have any vulneraries left. Glade also has to survive a 27% chance of death before Marita finishes off the one last enemy hero in the area, but it's all worth it because Finn steals a sleep edge from one of the enemies. Thankfully, Linnowen successfully heals Leaf the next turn, then heals Brighton from what would have been certain death. My next obstacle is the central castle, where several mages stand in my way. Glade's luck runs out as a mage finishes off his weakened body, and then Finn steps forward, braving an 8% chance of death to attack next. I'm running so desperate that Ronan and Marita start getting in on the action, as Ronan takes a massive hit while getting poisoned. Every time the enemy attacks is so terrifying, but I don't have a choice. I'm running out of heals in time, and I desperately need to get out of here as fast as I can. Marita goes insane with vengeance, killing off mages left and right, leveling up so much she maxes out her speed stat. I get rid of every mage, start advancing, and... Ralph triggers a portal that leads him directly back to my starting location. Oh, come on! That's not even dangerous for him, just really annoying. Blinded by bloodlust, Marita splits off from the group to kill the enemy general, while the rest of my group starts to take on the last roadblock between me and an exit. Finn captures an enemy mercenary to steal a Master Sword from her. Then Marita takes a look at the enemy general's stats, realizes Blind Bloodlust is overrated, and retreats. Callian then steps on the same tile Ralph stepped on. Sigh. That one was probably my fault. Eventually, Brighton captures a Wind Sword, clearing the last enemy from my path and revealing my exit at last. I have one final decision to make. There are a few enemies in the southeast of the map, and one of them holds a Bouge. If I could capture him, Orson would become an even better killing machine. I desperately want it, but I'm running really low on resources. Half of my army is poisoned, I have no vulneraries and antitoxins, and I only have 2 more heal charges left before I'm out of healing entirely. I really don't want to use Restore to get rid of poison, since I'm pretty sure I'll need the staff later. So, I make a really tough call. I evacuate, leaving the Bouge behind. You'd think this would be it, but getting my final units out is actually a chore. Ralph steps on the warp tile again, then Callian hits it again, and these units can only move 2 steps at a time in the forest. I actually restore Leaf's poison status just so he can stand around, waiting for everyone to get back. Callian takes so long to get back that I seriously consider straight up leaving him behind, but I don't. I just wait a very long time, finally teach myself where that freaking warp tile actually is, and eventually get everyone out. The best thing I can say about this level is that I was just as exhausted playing it as Leaf's army was experiencing it. By the time everything was over, I was so ready to get out of there. Rip Helvin and Lade, you were wonderful soldiers. I'm just thankful it wasn't worse. Chapter 17, Vengeance. We've arrived at Castle Leonster and are ready to seize the enemy main gates. Linnowen needs to take a well-earned nap, but everyone else is ready to fight. The army is much more conventional here, sporting in walled-in ballista to support their spread-out armies. Thankfully, the enemy isn't super aggressive on this level, so my first task is to just clear out every enemy I can in an effort to reclaim the Leonster villages south of the map. This goes extremely well, as my army overwhelms the meager resistance in the area. Then, Leaf goes to visit the village, as the village elder gives him a fascinating offer. The village is sick and tired of being controlled by the Empire, and offers their support to help take down the enemy ballista. They offer to spawn a bunch of weak allies who will lay down their lives to soak ballista shots and help me take the castle unscathed. The elder leaves Leaf with the prospect of accepting or declining this offer, and I take a while thinking about it. On one hand, my army is not very strong, and I have no good plans to deal with the ballistas right now. On the other hand, I'm not sure how much the villagers can actually help, and I don't want to let them lay down their lives for nothing. After thinking about this proposal for a very long time, I decline their offer. Maybe I'll accept the help if I need to reset the level, but for now, I don't think I'd make very good use of their help, and I don't want to kill people I'm trying to save. I'm going to try and do this on my own. Instead of placing my trust in the villagers, I place my trust in Orson. By dropping him off next to a couple ballista on the high ground, I task him with raiding the enemy, destroying their artillery, and getting back alive. To aid in his task, I use the 3rd repair beam on his Bouge, restoring him back to his full fighting potential once more. While Orson is on his mission, Finn, Leaf, and Brighton bait out shots from the eastern ballista, trying to drain them of ammo. As Orson sneaks through and takes out a ballista, enemy knights behind the wall start to respond to the attack. General Imelda, the woman I rescued a couple maps ago, orders a countercharge. Orson takes out the 2nd ballista, then I consider my options. I could stay and fight here, but Orson and Leaf have both taken a bit of damage, so I retreat to the rest of my army. My main army kills off all the cabs without much issue, so only the general remains. I consider killing her with Orson, but she has a scroll I'd absolutely love to steal, so I get greedy instead. She charges Leaf, asks herself what in the blazes she's doing, then gives me a game over. Well, that sucked. It took 2 hours to get here, and my reward was a crit on Leaf to kill him from full health. I restart the level, misposition my units, and lose Dean to a random archer 10 minutes later. Before I've even processed this death, I shut off the game and end for the night. Normally, I can handle losing a unit, but not right after a game over 2 hours into a relatively boring and easy level. I should have waited before restarting in the first place. Between this and the forest level, my mind just wasn't in the right place here to play this game. That wasn't my only rage quit of the level either. My next attempt, I lost Ida half an hour into the level for similar reasons, and rage quit there too. After another break, I finally get my mind into a suitable place, and then get back to where I was before. This time, Amalda charges Dean, which goes pretty poorly for her, and I have a chance to easily kill her. I'm still being greedy though, as I really want her scroll. Unfortunately, Lysis isn't fast enough to steal from her, and she's mounted, so I don't have an easy way to capture her. My best chance of capturing her involves trading Dean a sleep edge, which he uses to put the general to sleep. With Lady Amalda snoozing, I steal her stuff, then keep her captured for the remainder of the level in hopes of recruiting her to my side. Sadly, she doesn't join me despite showing every dialogue inclination of wanting to, but I do beat the level pretty easily from here. Orson trashes the rest of the ballista and bops the boss with a hammer. Leaf seizes the castle walls, and we prepare to storm the interior. As a reward for not letting any villagers die, the village elder gives me a master seal, which I plan to use on Finn as soon as possible. Chapter 18, Castle Leonster. The time has come to reclaim the castle that is rightfully mine, and to do it, a lot of things need to go right. Brighton, Lysis, Ralph, and Finn are all too tired to fight, but I give Lysis a stamina drink in hopes that he can help indoors. Without 3 of my strongest units, my army has extremely limited combat strength, especially when it starts the map split up into 2 units. This level involves the world's most complicated rescue operation, and as such, I fail it immediately. The enemy commander has captured General Xavier and holds his family to keep them hostage. As I understand it now, Xavier has 8 strong adjutants and 8 captured civilians, so if you rescue every civilian and allow each civilian to speak to each adjutant without letting any of the civilians die, they will turn to our side one by one, then Xavier will turn against the commander once every adjutant turns. This is made more difficult by the fact that the enemy soldiers will kill or capture the civilians, and Xavier and his adjutants are hostile until the civilians talk to them. So pulling up this operation is really difficult even if you know what you're doing. I, of course, understood none of this at the time, and just assumed I had to rescue the civilians and lead them outside. The good news is that I actually have 4 door keys at the start of this level, and I immediately see a golden prize that far outstrips all others. Lockpicks. An enemy thief starts out with these godly contraptions, but my army that spawns near the castle treasure room is kinda pitiful. The only unit there who can actually fight is Merida, and while she's a good unit, she's stuck to one range and has the durability of a wet paper towel. As a result, the thief quickly gets away and these lockpicks continue to elude me. My hostage rescuing army is a fair bit better, with Dean, Leaf, and Orson all being capable fighters. When I open the door to rescue these hostages, I'm expecting them to start moving outside, but because I understand nothing, they just sit there and wait. Deciding to at least use them for something, I order civilians to trap the stairs and block off any reinforcements, which works shockingly well and lets me prepare my next move. Things go pretty great until the staircase I can't reach starts popping out Fenrir mages. I don't have an easy way to reach them, as Merida facing off against this range by herself does not feel like a good idea. My only option is to silence them, as I have 6 charges of silence from a cleric on a previous level. I don't like using these up now, but my only other option is letting my treasure room squad get slaughtered, and I like that option even less. Thankfully, only 2 appear before they stop being summoned, so I'm not forced to use up all my silences. I finally open the last couple chests, where I get a silver sword and a door key. This brings me up to 2 door keys, but I only need 1 of them to break into the throne room. I charge in, and hope I have enough to overcome what's inside. Immediately after I open the door, all the hostages start moving, trying to reunite with their loved ones. I do not put 2 and 2 together in time, so I just start killing all of Xavier's generals. Orson kills Frank and Linowin kills Marlin, but the rest of these generals are tough. Almost like I wasn't supposed to kill them. Well, it's too late now. Orson has started his rampage and he's not going to stop. Dean kills Charles and Edward. Orson kills Andrew, and, oh, Xavier has a bow and kills Ronan. Ronan was a pretty bad unit, all things considered, but he did make it to this point, and that has to be commended. As the enemy turn ends, one captive, Mina, runs towards the fighting. I retreat, extremely confused with what's going on, leaving Orson to defend the door. Mina looks into the room, clearly wanting to reunite with someone inside, but she doesn't have a path to get there. Taking pity on her, I kill an unnamed soldier on my next turn, but I can't open up the path because that would expose the rest of my units. On the enemy phase, Orson kills Dirk and Nicholas, completing the slaughter of all of Xavier's lieutenants. At least the civilians all survived? Yay? Next up is General Xavier himself, and even though he killed Ronan, I still try my best to save him. Dean puts him to sleep with the sleep edge, and Orson captures him. I don't manage to recruit him, but I do at least get a killer bow and a master axe for my troubles. After that, only Gustav Baron remains. While I would love to put him to sleep in a similar way, he has 30 defense on the throne, and the sleep edge won't even scratch him. I release Xavier to let Orson take on this fight, then I let Orson swing his hammer at him. Eventually, Orson defeats Gustav, and I've reclaimed Castle Leonster. Upon reclamation of Leonster, Leif transforms from a level 20 prince and becomes a level 1 lord. Leif has reclaimed his birthright as the rightful lord of Leonster, but the Empire has no intention of letting him keep it. Chapter 19, A Rightful Heir Rises and Makes a Mistake. While Leif has reclaimed Castle Leonster, the Empire is not going to let him keep it easily. As Leif celebrates his victory, a desperate woman begs Leif to save her town from annihilation. Both of Leif's advisors, who up until this point have disagreed about everything, beg Leif to focus on this castle's defenses instead of riding out to help. Leif disagrees, promising to ride out to help this woman. He barely gets convinced by his advisors to let half his army get some sleep, while the other half of his army rides out as a vanguard force to help. Unfortunately, Leif's advisors would prove to be right, as Leif's army is attacked by an overwhelming Empire force and are forced to retreat. Leif rallies the rest of his army to help, and it becomes a race to flee back to the Castle Leonster, while losing as few troops as possible. Literally everyone gets deployed on this mission regardless of their fatigue level, which is greatly symbolic of Leif's new position in the war. Now, with something he needs to protect, Leif cannot hide anymore from the Empire. Everyone is fighting for their own survival now, which raises the stakes of these next few levels a ton. Okay, so this is actually false. The actual reason I'm ignoring this game's fatigue system is because the game is taking pity on me for losing so many units. And I'm just under the minimum deployment cap right now. However, while playing this, I didn't realize that, so I assumed it was a narrative decision from the game, and it actually made these missions way more intense. The next level is one massive retreat, with the goal of saving my frontline soldiers from a certain death, trying to save as many villages and civilians in the process. Alba rescues the civilian, quickly dropping her off to Finn, who takes off like the wind. Safia, who didn't go with the Vanguard group, uses her last rewarps to rescue various villages around the map before they get pillaged. Unfortunately, Alba is just a bit too slow, getting killed by Elster's silver bow before he can get far away enough from the Empire army. Dean rescues Linowin to prevent her from meeting a similar fate, as the two fly to reach my main army in time. Lysis nearly meets his end to Elster's silver bow as well, but Finn is there to help him escape. Then, Safia enters a house, where she hears an excellent tribute to Quan, a tragic character from Genealogy of the Holy War.
In seasons past, Leonster thrived with Quan upon its throne. Though less esteemed, Travant dreamed of making it his own. Quan's kin by marriage Sigurd was the victim of a coup. Quan had no stake, but told him, "Take the aid I bring to you." The limber bond of friendship was a noose around his neck. Juan planned a course with half his force, embarking on the trek. And so, with gallant mounted knights and queen upon her steed, he slowly marched, determined, parched across the desert heat. But oh, how Travant had waited and followed, hushed as death. His flyers would not be sated till Quan drew his final breath. So from the sky a swarm of foes came soaring into view, their numbers vast, their dragons fast, their lances aiming true. The startled knights could not escape, the desert held them fast. They had to stand upon the sand as bloody wounds amassed. The heart that bled for Sigurd led his forces to their end. His kingdom snatched, his queen dispatched, no respite for his friend. This world is not an ally, it is sinister and cruel. What Quan forgot, Travant did not, the caring man's the fool. And Sigurd he took to weeping as Thracia took their rule. There's no other code worth keeping, I, the caring man's the fool.
By this point, the battle is pretty much over. Most of my army has escaped, a couple of civilians get away, and those that couldn't are surrounded by the Imperial army with no rescue in sight. Bandits razed the house I couldn't get to in time, and the Imperial army seems content surrounding the civilians they've captured. Nobody wants to risk a major confrontation, so Finn uses his Master Seal to become a Duke Knight, and my army retreats back to Castle Leonster. Chapter 20. A Desperate Defense. Half a year has passed since the previous chapter. The Empire has chased us back to the castle and pushed Leif's army to the limit. My army is hiding inside the castle, disorganized, waiting for the end. Things are looking bleak, but there is a tiny ray of hope on the horizon. A massive rebellion, one far greater and better run than my meager resistance, is starting to form, and help from this huge army is on the way. Lord Seliph, a main character from Fire Emblem 4, will save us if we can hold out for 15 more turns. Looking at the map, things are already incredibly bad. I have one door key, and my army is trapped inside a doored castle, separated from each other, merely waiting for the Empire to destroy the walls or open the doors protecting them. Some characters, like Orson, will probably be fine, but others are in far worse positions. Ida and Callian are trapped in some outer defenses, far away from the rest of my army, and I have absolutely no idea how they can possibly get out of this one alive. My first act is one of emotional support. With such a dire situation, I use my third repair beam on Leif's Lightbrand. His sword shall shine once again to defend Castle Leonster. So, out of all the possible uses for my door key, what do I use it on? I could use it to help some of my army escape their awful situations, but I don't do that. Instead, I use it to open a chest. Lysis and Merida are trapped on the eastern side of the castle, so Lysis helps Merida open the door to the treasure room. Inside, I find a Master Seal, which Merida uses immediately to become a true sword master. I've been waiting for level 20 earlier, but I can no longer afford that luxury. I need my combat units to be at their full potential now. The Empire begins their assault by demolishing some walls and unlocking some doors for me. Ida and Callian take the opportunity to flee their tiny prison. Lysis and Merida start taking on some guards who had already infiltrated the castle before the attack began. Leif, Dean, and Safia get freed from the throne room by the Empire, and start charging the battlefield proper. Linowin and Orson engage the Empire from their prison close to the enemy, but Orson can't guard Linowin from multiple attack angles. Linowin becomes the first casualty of the battle, which is both expected and completely devastating. Somehow, Ida and Callian survive until my next turn, but their prospects are looking grim. More and more soldiers advance, but there is one ray of hope. The Empire unlocks the door separating my main army from their forces, so I finally get to charge out of the castle. Leif kills an enemy with his light brand, Orson slays whatever enemies are foolish enough to get close to him, while Finn and Dean head out to save my stuck units. Realizing I might need the support, I repair Orson's booge, transforming Orson from a killing machine into an even better killing machine. My army carves a path to rescue Ida and Callian from their hiding place. While the Empire has a lot of soldiers, my army makes some progress, but the Empire isn't out of surprises yet. Out of nowhere, the Empire sets up ambush spawn ballista on the southern edge of the map, and they start firing. Dean dodges an otherwise potentially fatal shot, and Ida was thankfully out of range, but that was a near disaster. Ida and Callian somehow finally join up with the rest of my army and are able to safely enter the castle walls, while Orson goes on a solo quest to destroy the ballista. After several turns, my army seems to have turned a corner, so I start advancing, and well, it turns out when the game says to survive for 15 turns, that's an indication that the enemy will probably get about 15 turns of reinforcements. I tell Finn to capture an enemy cleric where he's still in range of an iron ballista, right before the enemy gets a billion reinforcements. Ralph, in range of these reinforcements, gets taken out by a soldier. Finn gets hit by the iron ballista for 19 damage, then gets swarmed by enemies. The first enemy brings him to 2 health, then 2 more enemies strike. Somehow, Finn dodges both, barely surviving, before the enemy mages strike. Finn dodges a meteor, then somehow survives another mage casting fire on him, and he actually ends the enemy phase alive on 2 HP. On my turn, Finn releases his captive, and Brighton comes to help free him. Orson finishes off the really annoying iron ballista, and Sarah silences a meteor mage. Unfortunately, I still can't heal him because I'm out of physics, so it's up to Finn to pull off a miracle. His dodge stat is great, but if any attacks hit him, he's dead. To make matters even worse, the enemy spawns a billion more soldiers on their turn, and these soldiers have hand axes which give them 2 range. Finn dodges a hand axe, kills an enemy battle axe user, dodges another battle axe, and kills another battle axe user. Then he kills a 3rd enemy. He dodges another hand axe. He kills a 4th battle axe user. Is he actually going to survive this? All he needs to do is dodge a meteor. This only has a 36% chance to hit, and it hits. Finn couldn't escape, but he sure as heck made one incredible last stand. It took the entire Imperial army to bring him down, and even then, he almost made it out of there. What a legend. So, do I learn my lesson and retreat until turn 15? Absolutely not. I charge the boss while he's still getting reinforcements, stupidly leave Dean within his range, and lose him as a result of my completely careless play. I'm basically hoping for a game over at this point, so I get absurdly reckless, charge the boss with Orson, and, well, Orson easily survives. It's turn 15 now, so the enemy finally receives their last reinforcements and the boss starts moving. He hits Leif for a lot of damage, but doesn't kill my lord, so I retreat and start healing up my tanks. I turn off animations, probably hoping I'll make a mistake and lose, but I don't actually make another one for the rest of the level. Marita starts taking out enemies using her wind sword. Safia silences another meteor mage to reduce pressure on my soldiers. Orson is a one-man cleanup crew, and the Empire just starts slowly running out of troops. Orson easily kills the enemy general, and suddenly, I've won. An emissary of Lord Seliph arrives, calling himself Nana's older brother. Unfortunately, well, she died a long time ago, so that reunion isn't happening. In fact, I only have 8 units left. While I do save, I also keep my chapter 20 save live, just in case I need to redo this chapter. As long as I have Orson, I have hope, but I do not know if my 8 survivors are going to be enough to get me through the rest of the game. Chapter 21, The Counterattack. Having failed to capture Castle Leonster, the Empire is being pushed back on multiple fronts. Hope finally exists for Leif's army to advance back to Manster, the place that started it all. Before we can do that though, we need to capture Fort Danzig. An enemy priest stands in our path with a sleep staff, but he's not standing on a fort, which means Safia can easily silence him before he can move. Brighton takes out a couple enemy ballista, while Orson takes out the entire army. Well, Orson at least takes out an enemy Wyvern Lord, so all the mercenaries following him just flee. Orson does have one problem though. He's way too strong. He's becoming so powerful that weaker enemies are straight up ignoring him. Leif, Brighton, and Merida are still strong enough to take on these weaker units, but things do get a bit scary because Orson can't kill everything on enemy phase anymore. After a while, only the main enemy fort remains. This fort is guarded by ballista and mages, including the final boss mage who knows Blizzard. I didn't fully read through Blizzard's description and vastly underestimate its might. Just kinda sending Orson at the problem and hoping it goes away. Thankfully, Orson is ridiculous, so this actually works, and I clear the map without much issue. When I seize the fort, Leif realizes that Fort Danzig is not an ordinary fort. It's also a prison camp, which means all of my units who were captured over the course of this playthrough are being held prisoner here. Most of my units died properly, but they did take one prisoner early who's being locked up here, Matcha. As I prepare my prison break, I realize the prison has doors, and I have no door keys. So, instead of breaking Matcha out of prison, I just kinda turn around and leave. Sorry, Matcha, but there's literally nothing I can do here. Chapter 22. The End. After failing to rescue any of my captured brethren, I reach the second worst level of the game, and I don't even get to experience it. The enemy has a mage sitting on the throne with a berserk staff, so, I can't silence him, and I have no restore staffs. Without any restores, well, I really have nothing here, and I've completely lost. Sias, another mage that I can't silence for some reason, also has a sleep staff, and I just can't do anything about it. I'm completely, totally dead. There is nothing I can do from here, and this is where we end part 2 of our story. But it isn't time to give up. I've come too far to have it end here. With a heavy heart, I reload a previous save, heading back to Chapter 20. While this timeline might be doomed, perhaps the next one can meet a better fate.